Starting at the Saiyan arc, Piccolo casually destroys the moon. Calculations of this range from moon to large planet level. Later on, Vegeta outright threatens to wipe out the Earth, stated numerous times, both in the manga and some guidebooks. Then in the El Manga Legendary Guidebook, it is explicitly stated that a power level of 10,000 can destroy planets. And at the same time, by the Namek arc, Frieza is well known for destroying numerous planets, such as Vegeta. And by the end of the Cell arc, Super Perfect Cell states that he can destroy the solar system, which means anyone relative or stronger than him would reach solar system busting attack potency. Anyone under would at the bare minimum be planetary, if not possibly star level, considering some possible arguments. All of this escalates further in the Bout Saga, with a single statement, as unfortunately the manga lacks anything else that would be higher than solar system. Goku says Kid Buu can poof the universe and then believes he can one-shot Kid Buu with his full power. Following the same logic applied to Cell's solar system statement, this means Goku thinks he can one-shot a being who can poof or one-shot the universe, which would grant Goku Super Saiyan 3 and the Bout Saga universal attack potency. As within the context of the Dragon World / Universe 7, the universe would essentially be the mortal realm. And this is where my main contention comes from. I am of the belief that the DBS manga goes against this universal scaling and thus would be in a sense weaker. You could firstly explain this by either arguing the Dragon Ball Super manga simply isn't canon to the original Dragon Ball manga, and trust me, there's a lot of evidence supporting this, meaning its scaling doesn't connect to it at all and thus has a possible weaker scaling. Or you can argue that both share the same canon, but in doing so, accept that it rewrites and retcons the scale Toriyama had already set in stone during the Bout Saga. Either way, if you're approaching Dragon Ball as a strict manga purist, like many do, this creates a clear contrast, where by the end of Dragon Ball Z, its strongest characters, such as Super Saiyan 3 Goku, Kid Buu, Buuhan, Bootanks, and Vegito, amongst possibly others, would completely eclipse almost everything shown in Toyotaro's DBS manga, besides Xeno, of course. Most people don't really know what they're talking about when discussing Toyotaro's manga, partly reflected in its very small sales compared to the original Dragon Ball manga, and that it's in general just trash that nobody really reads, to be honest. This results in the belief that the DBS manga and the DBS anime have similar, if not equal, scalings based on what is ultimately perceived to be equal or similar feats. And today, we're gonna see exactly how wrong that belief actually is. The Battle of Gods arc in the DBS manga was released between June and November 2015, and as it shows us, it's very different from the movie and anime versions. In the manga, first and foremost, Goku never even mentions fusion at any point during the arc. This is a problem because in both the anime and the movie, which Toriyama wrote, Goku doesn't believe he has the slightest chance against Beerus with fusion. Yet, he's far more confident in facing him with Super Saiyan God. This detail alone is important because removing it damages the scale of the manga's version of Super Saiyan God, making it look far weaker than the other two continuities that has Super Saiyan God essentially above a hypothetical Super Saiyan 3 Vegito. Unfortunately, without that, despite being almost 10 years after its release and having numerous guidebooks, there isn't a single piece of evidence that has Super Saiyan God in the manga even twice as strong as Super Saiyan 3, concretely. As you can imagine, right off the bat, that's quite the problem. But it doesn't stop there. When manga Godku and Beerus get to actually fight, all we see from them is a single shockwave that expands all the way to the Kaioshin realm, and that's kind of it. This is where sloppy power scalers mislead people into thinking this is the same feat from the anime. In reality, Toyotaro's version of Battle of Gods show a much lower scale than Toriyama's, and sets the tone for the rest of the manga. To compare with the anime, in episode 12 through 14, after a prolonged fight, Super Saiyan God and Beerus become so strong that a single clash of their fists sends shockwaves across the entire macrocosm, reaching even the Kaioshin realm. Elder Kai explains that if this keeps up, their clashes could destroy the macrocosm. Goku and Beerus clash a second time, producing stronger shockwaves that destroy planets and stars across the universe. Elder Kai continues to explain what is happening and warns that the macrocosm could be destroyed in the next 2 clashes.
あと何回宇宙はあと何回2人の激突に耐えられるのですか
せいぜいもって2回
たった2回
いや3回かも
大事なところなので正確にお願いできます
じゃあ2回ちゅうことで
Kibito-shin, upon learning this, immediately shits himself and calls Goku and Beerus telepathically, begging them to stop fighting.
聞こえますか悟空さん今すぐ戦いをやめてください聞こえてるんでしょビルス様
Goku and Beerus ignores him and continues powering up to clash a third time, sending shockwaves that this time makes Elder Kai and Kibito-shin flinch from its energy. Goku then powers up fully, creating a dragon-like aura alongside Beerus, which boosts both of them further for a 4th clash. But, instead of the macrocosm being wiped out, a line appears, which is then revealed that Goku cancelled out Beerus' energy by hitting at the right angle at the same level of power.
なんとどえれえこと
ご先祖様今のは一体
あやつ全く同じ勢いと角度で拳をぶつけ合わせることでビルス様の攻撃を打ち消しおった
本当はさ2発目くらいで完成させるつもりだったんだけどよさすがビルス様だそう簡単にはやらせてくれなかった
They fight with this in mind for a few more minutes until Beerus charges a Ki Blast. Goku counters this with a Kamehameha and a beam struggle ensues, which Elder Kai later confirms to be the real final clash from earlier. These shockwaves are then shown atomizing planets and even reaching Otherworld where King Kai is losing his mind. They then, during this beam struggle, continue to further power up, which creates a condensed ball of energy. This condensed ball of energy that they then play tug of war with is explicitly stated that if it were to detonate, the entire macrocosm would be destroyed.
これは
さっきの爆発は悟空とビルス様のとんでもない木のぶつかり合いで起こったわけじゃがそれが超高密度エネルギーを生み出しおったあれが弾けたら今度こそ世界が終わるな
And the only reason why this did not happen is because Beerus directly Hakkai'd it.
この場に存在する全てのエネルギーを無にした
そんなことが
できるんだよ
This, without the shadow of a doubt, establishes Super Saiyan God Goku and Beerus at bare minimum low multiversal attack potency, or perhaps higher depending on your own interpretation of the cosmology. And one of the main reasons why there isn't a shadow of a doubt, as besides what I've explained so far, is that it is stated at least more than 5 times that the universe would be destroyed by the likes of Elder Kai.
どうやら発生地点から離れれば離れるほど破壊力が増すみたいじゃのうこりゃ参ったの宇宙が壊れちまうぞあと何回かあの二人がぶつかり合ったら 人も星もわしら神もビルス様も悟空もきれいさっぱり破壊されて、この宇宙は何にもない虚無の空間になってしまうじゃろう。
宇宙はあと何回2人の激突に耐えられるのですか？
せいぜいもって2回。
たった2回。次で3回目。宇宙が消滅する。結局こうなってしまったか。
名残惜しいが、どうやらお別れの時が来たようじゃのう。
ご先祖様、あれ、宇宙は、悟空さんは無事ですか
？3度目のぶつかり合いはこれからが本番のようじゃ。見てみ、あれが弾けたら今度こそ世界が終わるな。
これだけの攻撃をぶつけ合わせているのに、宇宙を破壊する波動が発生していない。なぜです？
わからぬか。
ウィス。
要するに2人のパワーが強すぎて、そのせいで世界が終わっちゃうんです。世界を終わらせるパワーなんて止められるわけないじゃないですか。
And the fucking narrator
ぶつかり合う2人のスーパーパワーは宇宙を破滅させようとしていた。破壊神ビルスと孫悟空、宇宙をも破壊しうるパワーをただただ互いにぶつけ続ける2人の喧嘩。
which includes even the episode's title, right?
宇宙が砕ける?
But not only that, it was used as an actual plot point. Goku actually had a challenge to overcome, because if he did not, the entire universe would cease to be. If he didn't match Beerus's power at the right angle in that clash, the universe would be gone, and he had to find that as a solution, otherwise everything would cease to be. Same thing for Beerus. If Beerus didn't Hakai this energy, this condensed ball of energy, the entire macrocosm would cease to be. There's very clear narrative and plot implications in these actions. You can't take them out. They're in the plot. They're directly in the plot. So going back to the manga, yeah, it has none of that. None. It has absolutely none of this whatsoever. All you get, and this is why you see this in all these YouTube videos from other so-called power scalers, is a single page. One page. And what happens on this one page? Well, there's like one clash of fists, about 1 to 4 shockwaves, give or take. Elder Kai saying, at this rate, either the universe is destroyed or the universe is in jeopardy. And then the fight ends immediately. It just stops right there. Just right there. After 3 clashes. And these people will try to tell you and gaslight you, like, yeah, no, yeah, bro, trust me, the low multiversal or higher. Yeah, it's the same as the anime. Just, no, okay, no. Elder Kai's statements, when he says at this rate, means eventually, we don't even know when. He says the universe will be destroyed, but nothing is really threatening Elder Kai or Kibito Shin. It's not stated that, their lives are threatened in this. There's nothing regarding Otherworld either. So with this in mind, the only thing you can really argue in what he means is just the mortal universe, not Universe 7. So that's already a massive nerf, and that only limits Goku to Universal, maybe Universal Plus. But then destroy does not necessarily mean you destroy the entire structure. You could just destroy most of what's inside and, that'd be it. For instance, in movie 8, when Broly destroys the South Galaxy, we still see numerous stars and maybe like a few planets still alive. But this is still like a few stars and planets out of billions of galaxies. So as you can see, this would show you that the South Galaxy is still considered to be destroyed despite there being little pieces of it left. Applying this logic to manga Goku now, well, the only thing the word destroy would mean here is that most of the universe would be gone, but not all of it necessarily. Therefore, you can't use this as evidence to say he's universal. He'd just be multi-galaxy at best. But it doesn't stop there. That's assuming that would even happen, which again, it doesn't. That's pretty unimpressive. This leaves us with the shockwave itself, a feat which you'd think is impressive, as creating a shockwave that extends outside the universe all the way to a different space-time would certainly be impressive. However, we already have something similar in the Bout Saga, where Goku could already generate enough energy that it would reach the Kaioshin realm by merely transforming into a Super Saiyan 3. We're not even talking about the shockwave of your punch, we're talking about your aura. Goku with his mere aura, as a Super Saiyan 3, reached that realm too. And if this wasn't even bad enough, Goku doesn't even absorb Super Saiyan God in base. Goku absorbing Super Saiyan God in base is not something we see within the Battle of Gods arc in the manga. And so, to prove that he did, some would actually try to suggest that we have evidence of this in Resurrection F, which is a little strange considering that Toyotawa actually skipped this arc in his manga. Nonetheless, there has been two arguments primarily that have been used to try and prove this. The first argument would go something like this. In the 2015 Resurrection F movie's promotional manga, made by Toyotawa exclusively, we see that while training with Whis, Goku at one point charges a punch towards Whis with Super Saiyan God in the background and is able to scrape a piece of hair from Whis' head. Without really thinking, you'd think, oh well, yeah, there we go, you have another manga made by Toyotawa, you have Super Saiyan God in the background, so clearly this is canon to the DBS manga, and Goku absorbs Super Saiyan God in base, right? Well, no, not at all. And in fact, again, this shows how very pseudo-intellectual and misinformed many so-called fans are, as it is the custom. To tackle first the argument that because there is a form behind Goku, he is as strong as this form, we've already seen in the original Dragon Ball manga that this is not the case. Kid Goku, when fighting Demon King Piccolo and Mr. Popo, has been shown to have the Ozaru at one point manifest itself in the background when trying to attack them. We know that at this point Goku was not as strong as the form. Otherwise, this would mean that Goku, in these very moments, not only absorbed Ozaru into base, like if he was like DBS Broly, but on top of this, would have a 10 times multiplier applied to his power level, which would mean that you're essentially saying Kid Goku absorb Ozaru into base and can have a power level of 2000 whenever he wants. Yeah, no, that by itself doesn't work. So, following that line of thinking, by itself, this panel with Super Saiyan God is not enough to prove this, but even if it was, this leads us to the problem of canonicity. You see, later on in the same year, in December 2015, we have an actual statement from Toriyama regarding his belief of canon when it comes to Resurrection F in manga form specifically. This was a comment he made for the 2015 Resurrection F anime comic that was released in late December. And it says the following, quote, "With Battle of Gods, last time as well, as with Resurrection F, I wrote the story but didn't make it into a manga, so there's no collected edition. In other words, this anime comic is the only way you can read New Dragon Ball in book form. And it's in glorious full color. Please enjoy reading it. I'm sure you will make new discoveries that you didn't pick up on the big screen." So not only does he just blatantly disprove this, he completely ignores Toyotawa's work during the entire year, as if it never existed, which, interestingly enough, also includes the Battle of Gods arc that came out earlier in the DBS manga. So to him, the only canon sequel to his manga that he wrote, surprisingly enough, are the manga format of the 2 movies he also wrote. I know, shocking stuff, but there you have it. So, if you still use Toyotaro's promotional manga and try to argue that it's canon to DBS, you thereby concede that the DBS manga by itself is not canon to the original Dragon Ball, and thus does not scale to it, since it's not the same canon. The second form of argumentation would go something like this. Alright, fine. Maybe Toyotaro's promotional manga for the Resurrection F movie is not canon to the DBS manga. But this V-Jump guide says that if you want to understand the events of Resurrection F, you have to read the Resurrection F anime comic, so doesn't that kind of imply that the Resurrection F anime comic is directly canon to the DBS manga? And since it's canon according to Toriyama, and basically the Resurrection F movie made in manga form, well, Goku absorbed Super Saiyan God in his base in that, so clearly that applies to the manga as well for DBS, right? Well, not quite. That doesn't really fucking work. I would argue this is just to give a reader a general gist of what happened during this arc rather than a literal transcript. And please also forget that when Toriyama said that the only way to read New Dragon Ball in book form would actually include the Battle of Gods anime comic, and therefore meaning that the DBS Battle of Gods manga arc made by Toyotaro is completely and absolutely ignored by Toriyama. But even then, there's still so many other problems continuity-wise for it to really fit. There is, at no point in the entire Resurrection F movie or anime comic for that matter, any evidence that Goku absorbed Super Saiyan God within his base form. But even more damning, the anime comic itself makes it very apparent that it is a sequel to the Battle of Gods anime comic, and at the end of it even promotes said anime comic instead of saying, read V-Jump where you can see the DBS manga's version of Battle of Gods. It just does not acknowledge it, period. So already there's a problem there. But beyond this, Toyotaro has a very different interpretation of Super Saiyan Blue than Toei or Toriyama for that matter, that aggressively contradicts the entire arc of Resurrection F. Super Saiyan Blue is Super Saiyan with Super Saiyan God and is a form that is incredibly stable. In fact, that's how Goku beats Golden Frieza, because he's got better stamina. Like, he can just handle this thing no problem, okay? So, it's very simple, right? Blue Super Saiyan, that's like the strongest form, and that has great stamina. In the Champa arc, we learn that Vegeta, from going Super Saiyan Blue for 3 panels, I counted, doing nothing, just standing around and landing one suppressed elbow strike, drained 90% of his energy. Yeah, and then we're supposed to believe that the events of Resurrection F, with this logic in mind, happened the exact same way. Yeah, no. I would be more willing to believe that Goku and Vegeta fought for most of the fight as Super Saiyan Gods, really. Based on that logic. And it just ended the same way as the movie, that's it. That's the only way I could see it be consistent with what we saw. So, no, he did not absorb Super Saiyan God into base, he just didn't. He flat out didn't. Now, he surpasses it later on, but not only does this happen far later, it is not nearly as impressive considering that Super Saiyan God here, as we earlier established, is not nearly as powerful as his movie or anime counterpart. And so, Goku, say in the Shiamba arc, in the Black Goku arc, and perhaps even in later arcs as a Super Saiyan 3, should not be quantifiably that much stronger than he was, or is supposed to be, in the Buu Saga, which leads us to the next point. In the Black Goku arc, Goku fights Trunks. He does a sparring match with him. Both are pretty much relatives in Super Saiyan 2, then Goku goes Super Saiyan 3, and Trunks goes into his weird mastered or full power Super Saiyan 2. Doesn't really matter here. But what does matter is that Trunks is very clearly relative, if not stronger, than Super Saiyan 3 Goku, since Goku decided to use Super Saiyan God to end the fight. So, when later in this arc you have Merge Zamasu, obviously exhausted and drained while fighting Perfect Super Saiyan Blue Goku, saying that he will wipe out the galaxy, so if it was a universe, you might as well just say universe or quadrant or whichever the hell. It really doesn't matter in this case. But you would think that he would say such a thing, but he doesn't, right? So it's made very clear in this instance, at least, that Zamasu believes he's at least a galaxy buster. That's what he believes. So, Trunks, the supposed equal to Super Saiyan 3, so therefore, by this logic at this point, a universe buster, hears this and does nothing. He just only intervenes when Goku loses and there's no hope anyway, so he just might as well try something after it's all over. Yeah. To remind everyone of the context, this is a Trunks who is stronger than a Goku that should be stronger than his Buu Saga self, who is a universe buster. So when Zamasu clearly declares himself galaxy level, Trunks should be, by that logic, stronger either as a Super Saiyan 2 or, as some Troglodytes would believe, in base. Yet he does nothing. Wouldn't Trunks intervene if he was far stronger? Except he's not. He's not at all. And that's why he doesn't intervene. It only steps in when Goku lost and all hope is lost. And so the only thing he can do is stall as much time as possible until Zamasu refuses. Thus we conclude that, again, either A, DBS manga is not canon, and so the manga in question has its own interpretation of what's the scaling in the Buu Saga, like fanfictions akin to Dragon Ball Multiverse, or B, supposing it is canon, it is a very blatant retcon of the scaling established in the Buu Saga, and thus very much lowers the scaling in question, because that means that Goku Super Saiyan 3 in the Buu Saga cannot possibly be a universe buster and also have this arc where an enemy is so weak that he becomes galaxy level and characters relative to him does not intervene or try to fight him at this level of power. And it doesn't help when you realize the upper limits of the DBS manga further helps this blatant retcon / contradiction to the Buu Saga's actual scale. So this leaves the big question. Well, to answer this, we'll be looking at 6 scales, which consists of 4 statements and 2 feats. These are Zamasu's alleged galaxy-wiping statement, Godku's shockwave that goes to the Kaioshin realm, Zamasu claiming that he will destroy parallel worlds, Frieza, who apparently threatened to destroy the universe, Goku and Vegeta's combined Gamma Burst Kamehameha, which warps the world of Void, and Whis stating that Moro would destroy the entire galaxy. Now, as we established, the feat with Super Saiyan God Goku is not that impressive and was already performed by Super Saiyan 3 Goku previously. The feat in question could have various interpretations and calculations. You could say that since the Kaishin realm is in a separate time space than to the original universe, then this could have potentially high universal or more attack potency. However, I have some doubts to this, considering the following statement from Zamasu and Moro. Not necessarily of the feat itself, but if the author understands it. Now, you might say, but Saiba, who cares about author intent? What's in the show is in the show. And I understand this, but at the same time, it's pretty clear what he's trying to establish with these statements. Why have characters like Zamasu and Whis say that, you know, Moro is like galaxy level if you're gonna have a feat before that? That doesn't seem very consistent, does it? Unless, of course, you believe this is in the same time space, or something similar to, say, Movie 12 Goku Shaking the Afterlife. A feat that has been calculated many times, which could be ranging from multi-galaxy level to solar system. So, the feat is a little questionable, but it should also be reminded that half of this was thanks to Beerus, once again, and this was done only once. This isn't something Goku could repeatedly do in that fight, as the fight ended after 4 clashes. Next up chronologically is Frieza's apparent threat of the universe. This is a Viz translation, but I would like to go through it anyways. And the statement is thus: there was an incident recently where Frieza, the Emperor of Terror, who once threatened to destroy the universe, was resurrected and went to attack Earth. Please note that this is implying that he threatened to destroy the universe during Namek and not during the Resurrection F arc. So this would not be for Resurrection F Frieza, but for the Namek Saga. But in reality, the statement is a mistranslation, and what it actually says is more accurately that it sent waves throughout the universe, or galaxy, I'm pretty sure. Which can be interpreted more accurately to be that Frieza had a very explosive impact, not in a literal sense, but more in a figurative sense, during the Namek arc, which he did. But at no point would actually give him literal universal attack potency. Not to mention that within the arc, at least if we're still trying to argue that it is the same canon as the original manga, has no such evidence, if not evidence to the contrary, both in manga and the anime. Meaning that we can pretty much discard this completely. We now move on to the Black Goku arc, where Zamasu states that he's going to wipe Goku out with the entire galaxy. You should also, however, note that Zamasu is extremely emotional and furious. He is not necessarily within his reason, or, again, being literal, as it is pretty common among people to exaggerate when they're furious. Now, of course, you could simply say that he is still correct, but we will go more into detail to why he's not later on. But do keep it in mind either way. We then have Goku saying that Zamasu apparently said he was going to destroy other parallel worlds.
However, as it is always the case with such phrasing, context severely matters, and while Merge Zamasu never said anything about this previously, both Black Goku and Future Zamasu explicitly clarifies that what they mean is that they're going to kill every single mortal one by one in these worlds, be it timelines, other world, doesn't matter, you get the idea. But not that they would, and therefore could, destroy entire timelines. This is not Dragon Ball Fusions.
Point is, Zamasu can't do that. And what he actually means in context is just
killing everyone inside, not destroying the structure. Meaning we can discard the statement pretty casually. We then have in the tournament of power, base Goku and Vegeta warping the World of Void through a Gamma Burst Kamehameha. This have led some to, again, argue some multiversal scaling. The problem with this is that they are assuming that the World of Void is the exact same size as the anime. The problem with this, of course, is that there's no such statements. It's only in the anime is the World of Void stated to be endless or arguably infinite, but Trump's translation is just endless, which does not mean literal infinity in size. So, as far as we know, this could be a realm that is not even planetary in size from the manga's case, which makes this feat performed by a fatigued base Goku and Vegeta pretty insignificant, all things considered. With all that out of the way, this leaves us with Whis stating that Moro, the villain of the following arc, after absorbing the angelic power of Nereus and fusing with the Earth, will have all of his swollen energy detonate, possibly obliterating the entire galaxy. Note that he does not state at any point quadrants or a universe or the macrocosm for that instance. Krillin seems to suggest something else, but that's Krillin's own headcanon. That is not what Whis says. And you can check within Japanese transcripts, he indeed says galaxy, not universe. In fact, you even have Japanese fans that complain about this, like, what's this about galaxy level? Making his statement pretty clear. Going back now to Zamasu's claim of wiping Goku out of the entire galaxy, you see why I do not see his statement as very valid. As of course, when Zamasu gets emotional, he tends to exaggerate a lot, as we see earlier when he is filled with joy after reaching this power, believing that he is quite literally above every god there is, and that he is unrivaled. So with this in mind, and considering that Whis says that the unrestrained detonation of a being that would casually blink away Zamasu, especially in this weakened state, to only be galaxy level, possibly, leads me to believe that Zamasu is not telling the truth when he says he would wipe Goku out with the galaxy. At the very least, that leads me to believe that Zamasu would not do this in a single strike, and thus negating his statements or the argument that he would be galaxy level. Leaving us to conclude that current Goku, as well as the high tiers that would be equal or stronger than Planet Moral's self-destruct, would be possibly galaxy level. You could also argue that Merge Zamasu is perhaps referring to a single galaxy, while Whis is referring to a quadrant. However, I think this is just wishful thinking, as there is no effort from either side to specify a northern quadrant, a south quadrant, or anything of this proportion. And so, I'm led to believe Whis would be far more objective than a enraged, emotional Zamasu, which would mean ultimately that DBS manga Goku in Ultra Instinct is only galaxy level, sadly enough. So in conclusion, as I've previously established, regardless of your own personal beliefs of the DBS manga's canonicity to the original, the scaling is in such a way that the Bout Saga to this very day remains the highest level of power the Dragon Ball manga has ever seen. if we exclude things such as heroes, etc. Therefore, manga Buu Saga Goku Super Saiyan 3 post Kid Buu would stomp current DBS manga Ultra Instinct Goku, Ultra Ego Vegeta, Beast Gohan, Orange Piccolo, newly in his weird Super Saiyan form, Angel Moro, Peak Granola, Peak Gas, Peak Jiren, Black Goku Arc, Vegito Super Saiyan Blue, Manga Beerus, any of the Gods of Destruction, all of them combined. That's right. All of them combined, all of them together, would still lose to post Kid Buu Super Saiyan 3 manga Goku for the simple fact that said Goku can one-shot a universe, or pre-retcon can one-shot a universe. Again, doesn't matter in your own belief of canonicity, both can be argued. While the current scaling for the highest tiers in the manga, besides Xeno, still struggle with a single galaxy. And before the inevitable statement from Champa in Chapter 6 where he supposedly threatens to destroy the universe, if you actually read it, all he says is, I don't care what happens to this universe. Which is pretty vague, and the reason you're even in the first place assuming by default he means that he's gonna one-shot the universe is because of the narrative that has been ingrained in the anime. But such a narrative does not exist in the manga, so that is not conclusive enough evidence to be used to argue a universal God of Destruction or a universal meta in the Dragon Ball Super manga, and thus can be used. And so based on the available information that is valid, we can only go as far as galaxy level at best, which is also a little funny because this does unironically mean that peak Saitama in the manga may or may not be stronger. So yeah, that's something funny to think about right now. You can thank Toyotaro for that one. Oh man, that Toyotaro. At least, thank God his manga is not canon. I mean, could you actually imagine if, like, some schmuck like Ioku would just decide to, like, remake DBS and include Toyotaro's non-canon slop and try to market it as canon? Oof. Oh no. God help us all.